All right. Well, welcome to engagement. Yes, we're going to talk about marriage. No, we're not. We're going to talk about, as we started talking about last week, universal design for learning. Now, you were exposed to the framework, and the reason I began last week with the elements that I did was, okay, we've talked about individuals that with learning challenges. You're about to present on those next week. We talked about the law. We have a foundation element of what the law is for and why the law is necessary to be able to facilitate unique specialized services for individuals with disabilities. But okay, Sean, now how do we do it? And the relevancy here to me with the framework is that universal design for learning is one of several frameworks we'll look at this semester. Many of you have already looked at the framework of positive behavioral intervention supports. We'll look at also frameworks of like tier-based interventions, MTSS or RTI, and many of us have looked at this as well. Now, the universal design for learning as a framework has actually been shown to be very much a facilitator of a number of elements that can fit within there, evidence-based practices, interventions, but also a way of facilitating much inclusionary practices. So we're going to focus in this week on several different components of UDL, and the first one is on this idea of engagement. Now we know engagement is a top 5 predictor for inclusion. If we can motivate, if we can engage, and a laundry list of other terms, and I'm going to introduce a couple others in just a moment, we know we'll have a level of success towards including a variety of individuals, particularly those with disabilities. Now, we also know that if we have a level of success in student engagement, we will see progress in respect to learning outcomes. And we've seen that not only with the individuals we work with, but also a level of professional success that this image is trying to facilitate as well. So therefore, if we're going to look at the framework, Universal Design for Learning, that has several principles, why would we not look at engagement, which also aligns itself as a predictor for inclusion and as a predictor for learning outcomes? So with that said, as a framework, let's kind of facilitate a little bit more description of it. Now, many of you, when you think of engagement, or you think of motivation, or you think of other elements, and you could certainly put in those words, many of us start thinking of a term that's been out there now recently, the last several years, this idea of grit. And grit is another area that people think of in terms of motivation, engagement, things of that nature, or what we're leaning that towards. And I'd argue definitely, because we're looking for a level of persistence. And I'm going to get to that, a level of self-regulation, a level of self-determination in the individual. These are all critical elements that the framework helps to facilitate, that is critical for me, for our knowledge as future educators, or working with individuals that are looking to develop. These are critical things that we would need to engage in. So with that said, I'm going to stop this show for just a second. I'm going to move us over here to a little bit of a TED Talk. Many of you have seen elements of this, but I want to emphasize this in respect to the grit. And we're only going to take a look at a portion of this. And then, of course, I'm going to ask you folks to take a look at this all of 6 minutes. But we'll take a look at a minute or so just to emphasize this idea of the power of being able to develop this skill, the level of engagement, motivation. In this instance, it's that facilitation of grit, which I think is interwoven into engagement, motivation, depending upon how you define and see it. So here we go.
And it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. A few years ago, I started studying grit in the Chicago public schools. I asked thousands of high school juniors to take grit questionnaires, and then waited around more than a year to see who would graduate. Turns out that grittier kids were significantly more likely to graduate, even when I matched them on every characteristic I could measure. Things like family income, standardized achievement test scores, even how safe kids felt when they were at school. So it's not just at West Point or the National Spelling Bee that grit matters, it's also in school, especially for kids at risk for dropping out. To me, the most shocking thing about grit is how little we know, how little science knows about building it. Every day, parents and teachers ask me, how do I build grit in kids? What do I do to teach kids a solid work ethic? How do I keep them motivated for the long run? The honest answer is...
All right. Now, the honest answer, I'll let you guys go back to this when you get a chance. I have a link. I would like you to take a look at that video in its duration. But one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is the fact that that stamina, that perseverance, that persistence, that's where we're going to build for that level of engagement. And another element in terms of engagement, which reinforces us back to the Universal Design for Learning framework, and many of you have seen variations of this, and that is we have our 3 columns going across, and take a look at our first row. High attention, high commitment leads to an engagement where they see the task associated with meaning and value for themselves, and that when they're faced with difficulty, they persist. Now that is a skill we want to make sure we facilitate. That's a skill we want to be able to develop in an individual, because we see at the bottom of the first column, diverted attention, the bottom of the second column, no commitment, and the bottom of the third column, rebellion. My goodness, we definitely don't want that element. And we know there's attributes affiliated with that with students with disabilities that we need to avoid. Now with that said, what I'd like you guys to do is take a moment here and head off to this bit.ly, and I have this linked off of our activity folder. So in Blackboard, you'll see our activity folder, and the first link you're going to see for the activity folder is that GRIT video. The second link you're going to have here is a Padlet, and this Padlet's going to take you to an area that what I want you to do, and I'll go ahead and click on this real quick, and I'll make sure you can see it as well. So I'm not sure what you can see, what you can't see, so I'll make sure I delete out of this. And what I'd like you to do here is I'd like you to give me 3 things right now. So you go ahead and click and just type away here on your Padlet 3 things that you do to engage learners. 3 things. Think about 3 things in terms of what you're doing to engage learners, motivate learners. Now it might be to complete a assessment that you're working through for diagnosis. It might be to complete a task that you're working with for tutoring. It might be something you've done in the past that you've seen to work, and maybe not even something you've done, but rather maybe something a colleague has done or someone that you're working with has done to be able to facilitate this, or someone that is mentoring you. So what I want you to do is take a moment. All right, I'm going to take a pause here for just a second, and I want you to go onto that Bitlet and that Padlet, fill it out. There's a URL, and again, this is up under our folder for today, up under activities, and this will be the second link. Now I'm going to pause here and let you pop over to there.